Hey everyone, this month's coding challenge is going to be all about machine learning. So I think when a lot of people think of machine learning, they think of images like this. I just did a quick Google image search for machine learning, and it's just sort of random pictures of futuristic brains that have circuitry in them or robots in front of blackboards learning things. A lot of people maybe don't know what it means. So we're going to go a little bit deeper into machine learning today, and in particular we're going to be talking about supervised learning. So if we click on that option on machine learning, you can see that we get some more visuals that give us a better explanation. So I thought this one here from TechVidian explained things pretty well. So basically what supervised machine learning is we have some raw data or raw input that we want to be able to see our robot or our machine learning algorithm decide when new things are put in what they are. So there's tomatoes that are being used here, but say if we had a bunch of different information here, maybe we had cats and dogs and tomatoes. So what supervised learning is all about is that we have a person, so a coder, a computer scientist up here that is classifying the data using our own minds. So we look at the pictures or we give the pictures to the algorithm with a label on them, and we label it the correct way and then create an algorithm with it. Now what a computer will do is process that algorithm and try and pick out those pieces that uniquely identify a cat or a dog or a tomato. So for instance, with a tomato, it might be that it's red, although there are green tomatoes too. And it has a stem, or, it's in a field. With a cat or a dog, maybe they would identify whiskers or pointy ears or certain colors. What the computer decides is important then gets spit out into this model. It's been trained, and now when you give it a picture of a tomato or a cat or a dog, the computer then should be able to identify it. So we're going to do some supervised learning now with a product from Google called Teachable Machine. So let's just open up a new tab, and we're going to say Teachable Machine. You'll see it's the very first link up here, and we'll just press Get started. So Google has already provided 3 different types of algorithms, and there's probably more to come pretty soon. So the first one is that this model can differentiate between images of different things. So you can see that this girl here is identifying between a person and a stuffed dog, but you could use any images that you want. There's also an audio project, and so that will allow you to be able to record certain sounds, and then the computer will be able to identify that. So if you think something like Alexa or Siri, they would use a machine learning algorithm to do what they do too, to understand what you're saying. So for instance, if you wanted to make a machine learning project that when you said good morning to the app, it would open up all of your most used tabs or something like that. That's definitely a possibility. But the project that we're going to do today, I'm just going to do a sample one, and you can choose to do your own project for this challenge or follow along with mine. But what I'm going to do is use the pose project. And what that does is it can track movements in the body, and it registers little points on your face or your body. I'm going to use it to create a little alarm for when I get tired or sleepy in front of the computer. So, I know nowadays we're all in front of computers a little more often than we have been in the past. So this one, I'm going to create a program that's going to set off an alarm when I tip my head to the left or the right. If I'm sitting up straight and looking at the computer and engaged, there'll be no alarm. So let's get going. We're going to just press Pose Project, and what it does is it creates a new model for us to fill in. So you can see that there's classes up here, and it gives you a little walkthrough as well, but I'm going to do that for you. So the classes here are basically the labels. So what I was talking about earlier with cat or dog or tomato when we were looking at that picture. So the first one that I'm going to give it is neutral. So that'll be when I'm just looking at the computer and everything's all good. Then I'm going to give it a class of sleepy left. And I'm also going to add a class for sleepy right. That way when I tip my head in either direction, it's going to sound off an alarm. So what we need to do now is give it samples. So we could upload pictures of different positions, but a really easy way to do that is to give it samples using your webcam. So I'm going to click that, and I'm going to allow my camera. And now you're going to see me. And you can see that the little blue dots are registering points on my face and on my shoulders. And they're going to be important for when we want to position ourselves. So I'm going to sit kind of straight onto the camera, and there's a couple different ways that you can capture these images. So you can press hold or hold to record, and it'll take some pictures. Or what you can also do, and what I find easiest, is you turn off hold to record, and then you can give it a certain number of seconds. So the delay will be at the beginning to give you some time to get in the right position, and then it's going to take a burst of photos for 6 seconds. So I'm going to do that just to make it a little bit simpler. So record for 6 seconds, and then I'm going to look at the screen. Okay, so we got 116 pose samples, so that's pretty good. The more the better for training your model. And you can also record other people sitting in certain positions too, just so that it has a better variety. But I'm going to just leave it with me. And I'm going to come down here and give some samples for sleepy left. And again, I'm going to do the same thing for sleepy right. Okay, we got 109 samples there, and now it's telling you that we have to train our model. So just like in that image, all we have to do here is click a button, and the computer kind of takes that information and picks out what it thinks is important. So it's going to be using these registration points and also, the background, everything in the picture to decide what's important. But because we're in the pose model, it's going to be using a lot of these registration points as its main things that it's looking at. So we're just going to say train model, and it's going to take a little bit, and it'll give you this warning saying that you can't switch tabs. So you have to leave this tab open while it's compiling the data and training the model. Okay, awesome. So now our model is trained, and we want to make sure that it's kind of doing what we hope that it will do. So down here on the bottom, you can see that it's registering that I'm neutral. And you can see that it's registering that I'm sleepy left and sleepy right. So we're going to go to export model so that we can use this code in another way. The code down here is a mixture of some HTML and some JavaScript to create a little box on your website that will measure this. Basically, this is your model here, or how to access your model. Your model is actually linked in a couple of files down here called model.json and metadata.json. So what we're going to have to do is take this piece of code and put it into a code editor and add the stuff in about the alarm. And what we're also going to have to do is upload this model to Teachable machine so that it's available for us to link to from our website, which will be just on our computer. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is upload our model, and that's going to take a second as well, and then it's going to give us a publicly available link. Now what it doesn't do, it doesn't send any of the images that you just trained your model with. It just puts the model up there. So the model can be used with any image. So you can have somebody else use this with their own face, and it should still recognize the neutral left and right positions. Okay, so even though it's being put up into a public space, it's just the code. It's not any of the images. So you don't have to worry about that. But what we need to do now is we need to have some way to edit this code here. So this code down below is basically just some sample code with some HTML and some JavaScript to be able to create basically this, the little picture with like the webcam view, and then giving you the percentages of which pose it thinks that you're doing. So we're going to take this and we're going to, there's a couple options. So if you are working on a computer, you can use a code editor, something like Sublime or Notepad++, or even just regular Notepad, and copy this into it and edit it from there. And then when you save it on your computer, all you have to do is double click it and it will open up in a web page. If you're on a Chromebook, you're a little bit limited because you don't have any programs on the Chromebook to be able to edit text with. So what we're going to do is bring this into Google Drive. So I'm going to copy this whole thing, just the code. So I'm pressing Control-C, or you can right-click and press copy. And I'm coming back here to my Google Drive, and I'm going to say new blank document. And I'm just going to Control-V to paste. Now we are going to lose, you know, some of our nice abilities with a coding editor, but I think this is a fine workaround. So I'm going to call this index.html. And index is just usually the word used for the first page in your website. And we're going to kind of have a look here. So anything that's got these double lines in front of it is actually a comment. So it won't be seen in your code, but it's used to kind of give you some information about what each of these pieces of code is doing. So, you know, you can see right here that these script tags here are calling to scripts outside of your project. So you can tell that because they've got the CDN in front of them. So it's calling to the models or the code that's been created by Teachable machine. So that's publicly hosted as well. Up here at the top, we've got these divs. So they're basically just creating, they're used a lot in HTML as well. So they're just creating a space for the webcam view to be seen on our screen, and also creating a button that's going to say allow us to start. So when we create this, the camera's not going to be running constantly. It's only going to be run when we say start. Now you can see down here that this is where we need to put the link to our Teachable machine, so the model that we trained. So if we come back over here, we can see that this is the publicly shareable link. So we're going to copy that and bring it over here and pop it right in here where the red is, in between the two double quotes. It's important to keep those double quotes in there. And then if we come down a little bit further, you can see that it's also initializing. So this is the init function. It's also bringing in the model.json and metadata.json. So these two files are also part of this package, your Teachable machine package. So just to make things simpler, what it does is it creates, it concatenates, that's the fancy word for basically just puts together this URL up here, so the constant URL, and model.json. So what all this does is it's taking this URL and concatenating it or adding it to model.json. And it does the same thing for metadata, so that it's pulling those two pieces of data as well. Then we can see here that we're creating the webcam view. So, you know, it's giving it a size. So if you wanted your webcam view to be bigger, you can do that here. The flip is the angle of the camera. So if it's not showing up the way that you want it to, you can say true or false and it will flip the camera. It's calling the setup function and the play function. For right now, we don't need to know a ton about JavaScript, but basically this is the format in which JavaScript is written. If you call a function, you usually have the name of the function and then brackets. So this section right here is just calling to the elements that are up here in this div. So it's calling to the canvas and basically building that view. And then right here, it's looping through and making its predictions. So this piece of code right here, you'll see a ton for when you are creating a for loop in your code. So basically, it's going all the way through each of the different options and then choosing the one or drawing the pose that has the highest percentage here. So we don't need to know much more about our code than that. So let's save this file and see what it looks like. So the last thing that I'm going to do before I save it is I'm going to put some HTML tags in here. So anything with these divs here before the script is really HTML, and we want it to be recognized like that. HTML. Okay, so let's go to File, and we're going to download as plain text document. Actually, I mean, you could save it as a web page, but I'm just going to save it as a plain text, just so it won't be zipped. So I'm going to go to Downloads, and I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it Sleep App. And we want it to be called index.html. So I'm going to say show in folder and then open it up. So it's going to open it up in a new web page. And when I press start, might take a second, it's going to ask me to use my camera. Okay, so now you can see that it's using our model, and it gives just a basic text version. So it's recognizing that I'm neutral, sleepy left, sleepy right. So we know that it's working. So now what we want to do is add in the part with the alarm. So let's go back to our code and do that. So we have a couple pieces that we need to add to this code in order to have our alarm play when it detects that we are sleepy left or sleepy right. So first thing we need to do is we need to add some code up here in our HTML inside of our container that's going to hold our audio file. So I'm going to write that in and then come back and we'll talk about it. So we can see that I've added in some break tags here, and that just leaves a little bit of space in the div there. And then I added in an audio tag. So we gave this audio tag, which starts here and ends here, an ID of wake up audio. So that's just the name of it. We're going to have to call this tag up again when we try and make the JavaScript connect to the HTML. So that's important that we name that something that we're going to remember. And then just like adding in a picture, we used a source tag here to add in a link to a file called alarm.mp3. And we gave it its type so that it's an audio or an MPEG file. And this here is just if someone is using an old browser, it's going to come up with a message saying that your browser doesn't support HTML5. So that's only if somebody's using a really old computer, so you should be good on that one. And then we ended out the audio tag. So next what we have to do is add some code down here in our JavaScript section that's going to call to this element and make and define some functions here for us to play and to pause our audio. So let's do that next. So right here, we added in the functions to pause and play our audio file. So first thing we did was created a variable called odd, and we're using the document getElementById to be able to call back to our ID up here in our audio tag. So what we're going to do is then call the function play or define the function play odd to be take the variable of odd and play it. So we're using the play function. Again, like we talked about earlier, when you're calling or creating functions, they always look this way. It's the function name and then brackets afterwards. And we also want to create a function called pause odd, and then what that's going to do is take the variable, the audio variable, and pause it using the pause function. So we need to make sure that we outline those, because now that we have defined what those functions are and defined our variable, now we're going to be able to use those down in our for loop, which is down here where all of the predictions are being made. So right in here, we're going to put it in this for loop. So now we're going to write some code to tell it when to play and when to pause the audio. Okay, so we made sure that we put this new code still within this curly brace, because we want it to be part of this for loop, because we wanted to keep checking over and over and over again to see what option it's selected. So basically what we're doing here is we're going to make it so that if prediction 0, which prediction 0 is the neutral prediction, because that's the first one in our list, if the probability of it is greater than or equal to 75, so 75%, then we're going to pause the audio. Now, this number can change a little bit depending on how sensitive you want it to be. So if you find that it's playing the alarm too often, you can make this a little bit less sensitive. So if you wanted it to be lower, you can do that. Now if you put it all the way up to 100, it's going to be extremely sensitive, and so it's only going to not or pause the alarm that we're playing when it's exactly lined up perfectly. So I would recommend that you at least put it down a little bit in order to give you that margin of error. And then it's else play the audio. So basically, if it's not within 75% of probability that it's a neutral position, then it's going to play the audio. So now what we're going to do is we are going to save this file. So we're going to go File and Download as plain text. And we're going to go to our Sleep app, and we're going to change this to all files, so that way we can see our index file and make sure that we overwrite it. So we want to replace the one that's already there. Yes. Now you'll also see, if we open up this folder, that I've added in an MP3 file called alarm. So you can either create one on your Chromebook or your computer, you can record one on your phone and send it to your computer, you can download one from the internet. Just make sure that it's an MP3 format, and also you have to change the name to alarm. Now the reason why we do that is in our code here, the source we're saying is something called alarm.mp3. So if you change the name, so this can be anything you want here, as long as it's the exact same name as the file that you've added into your folder here, because it needs to be in the same folder. So we've got our file, we've got our code, let's test it. Okay, so we're going to press start. And press allow. So you can see when I'm neutral, no alarm plays. But if I'm to the right or the left, an alarm plays. So this is a good way to keep your posture too. So thinking about other ways that you can use the machine learning code is a good one would be maybe a posture monitor. So you could make it so that, when your shoulders are slumped, it sets an alarm. You could try and create something using the voice recognition model and have something almost like Siri or Alexa. So definitely give it a try. It's a really easy way to jump into JavaScript coding, and it's also a really easy way to get into machine learning. So give it a try yourself.